Okay, so the 5.2 worksheet, just some few examples here, and I'll just record my answer, and then yeah, you can see how you did. So for the first one, I have the cosecant of x, which can be written as 1 over the sine of x. And since sine of x is already there, you could write it over 1 if you want. You don't have to. But the key here would be there's a sign on top and on the bottom, so you're left with just 1 over 1 or 1. In part B, cotangent, right? I can do my sine of x plus cosine of x over sine of x times a cosine of x. And so that turns into sine of x over 1 plus cosine squared of x over sine of x. And so I would take my denominator, so I'm going to take this sine of x and multiply it by the top and the bottom. So that's multiplying by 1. Sine of x over sine of x is just 1. Now, technically, I should do 1 over 1, but that doesn't do anything. And so now I have sine squared of x over sine of x plus cosine squared of x over sine of x. And some of you might have skipped that step, but the key is my two denominators are the same, so that's my common denominator. And then now on top, I have sine squared of x plus cosine squared of x. And we should recognize that this thing right here is the number one Pythagorean identity, so that's 1 over sine of x. And 1 over sine of x would bring me back to just a plain old cosecant of x. So a couple quick examples. Now, 5.2 used the terminology verify. So you can pick either side, and for practice, sometimes it's good if I pick one side, you pick the other, just to see if you can get it to work. So I'm going to circle that, and then I'm going to write it as 1 over sine of theta, and secant would be 1 over cosine of theta. So I use two of the reciprocal identities. So 1 over sine is being divided by 1 over cosine, so you multiply by the denominator. And remember, with fractions, you multiply across the top, you multiply across the bottom. So you have cosine of theta over sine of theta, which is another name for cotangent of theta. And that's what we had to get to. So once you get to that cotangent of theta, you know you're done. All right, and the last one. It's going to kind of be similar as to the 2 above here. So this is cosine of x plus sine of x times sine of x over cosine of x. So what I did is I changed the tangent into that sine of x, cosine of x. So I have cosine of x plus sine squared of x all over cosine of x. So I'm going to put that cosine over 1, and to get the common denominator again, I take turns. I take this cosine, and I do it on the top and the bottom. And technically, I take that 1 and put it on the top and the bottom, but that's not going to do anything over there, so I don't need to do that. And I end up with cosine squared of x over cosine of x. And I don't have to do anything to this one, so it's just sine squared of x over cosine of x. So again, some of you may have just added those together because you have a common denominator of cosine. So now that's cosine squared plus sine squared of x. And there's that number one Pythagorean identity again. And so I now have 1 over cosine of x, which is secant of x. And if you look back at the beginning, that's what we were trying to get to. And so that's the end of the 5.2 worksheet.